banned alcohol?
No.
Or what was
Certain states introduced prohibition, such as Andhra Pradesh, unified Andhra Pradesh. Of course, Gujarat has always been dry. But the advertising of alcohol is banned in India and has been banned and still is banned.
When was this time when you started acquiring a lot of alcohol brands? Because a lot of those brands were scared of the state because the state was getting involved in the alcohol business, or maybe they wanted to ban or prohibit certain things. What was this time where you started acquiring certain alcohol brands and cheap because you and your father was bullish on it?
No. That was in 1977 when Morarji Desai was the Prime Minister of India, and he publicly announced that there should be prohibition all India. Okay, which means that alcohol should be banned across the country. So obviously the value of the stocks and shares of almost all alcoholic beverage companies, whether distilleries or breweries, fell. My father was very clear that prohibition could never succeed in India. And therefore, he bought. And so that's how we became number one by quite a fair distance. Because all those who panicked and sold out, my father acquired.
But was there something you guys knew which others didn't?
No,
or it was
absolutely.
just pure conviction?
No, it was just pure conviction because we knew that prohibition had not even succeeded in the United States. And plus, if you look at the amount of revenue generation for the state governments through the sale of alcohol, there's no way in the world that prohibition would have succeeded in India.
What happened after your father's death? You were doing this successful stint, you were taking bold steps, you wanted to make alcohol a cool brand. All of this was happening. Everything was going right? What happened then?
Well, I was in the US. I had gone to finalize promotion and export of Black Dog Scotch whiskey when my father sadly passed away at a cocktail party in then Bombay. And he was only 59. Nobody ever expected him to pass so young. I was just past 27. So I took the Air India flight and flew back from New York and performed my father's last rites. And then the fun began because my father surrounded himself with a few stalwarts.
Meaning?
People who he put in positions of great authority who were also very close to him personally. So he had somebody running the Western India businesses, somebody running the Eastern India businesses, somebody running the Southern India businesses. And don't ever forget, in those days, the structure was that United Breweries Limited was the holding company. And the other companies in the group were largely controlled by its largest shareholder, United Breweries, or they were subsidiary companies. And so the inevitable debate started on what next, what role I should have. Of course, people acknowledged that I was in the business. But people, I think, were a little reticent to speak openly about their own aspirations of being the chairman. Then something very funny happened. We had annual general meeting of shareholders that was coming due. And the shareholders in the front line who had seen me with my dad proposed my name. And that's how all other aspirants were silenced because they couldn't publicly sort of get up and say that they were more qualified particularly when it was evident I had shareholder support. And there I was installed in what I call the hot seat at a very young age. But fortunately, thanks to my upbringing, my father's insistence on proper training, familiarization with the business, time in America, time working with him, I wasn't raw. I had a fair amount under my belt to be able to address the challenge of the role.
I was reading an article where uh, it said that you didn't trust people who were in control at the time of your father's when your father was a chairman. So that's why you hired your people and your friends, because you didn't know that if you could actually go to them for the right advice or no.
No. That's completely misleading. It's false. I never hired any of my friends. But let's put it this way, they would have been too young and inexperienced in any case. I mean, as I said, I was barely 28. They would be my contemporaries. So the question of hiring them and putting them in management positions just didn't arise. But I encouraged a lot of professionalism from within. I mean, people who then became the president of the spirits division, of the breweries division, and all the rest of it. I mean, my father's time, the average age of the regional directors or the regional satraps was probably around 60, between 60 and 65. And in 5 years after I reorganized, I mean, the average age was about 40. Okay. And these were all professional managers promoted from within the ranks. I mean, yes, there were a couple of exceptions where I hired people from extremely well-known organizations, like major consultancy firms, so on and so forth. But beyond that, largely it was all internal promotion.
Give me differences between before. Okay, so when your father was the chairman versus when you were the chairman, give me 3-4 differences. What happened in United Breweries?
It was the entire approach. For instance, mine was a decentralized, accountability-led approach.
Okay.
I would have monthly operating review meetings called MORs for each line of business.
Okay.
And that's all I wanted to know about how the businesses were performing on a regular day-to-day basis. I wasn't leaning over the shoulders of the management team and trying to micromanage things. When opportunities came along, then of course we'd had separate discussions. So if you empower people, accountability comes along with it, because people are also motivated to demonstrate their own capabilities. Now, my father's style was, as I said, far more hands-on, owner-operated, micromanaging management style, and he spent a lot of time doing it. I had a lot of free time, as I will tell you as we proceed, because of this decentralization and this whole new management culture that I had
enough time in your
introduced in the UB group. And this was between, let's say, 1983 and 1986, 87. That is why I was able to then acquire the Berger Paints global business based here in the UK and actually become a non-resident Indian.
In 86?
88.
80, okay.
Yeah. And I still have a letter from the Reserve Bank of India confirming that from 1988 I would be treated as a non-resident Indian for tax and exchange control purposes. And the reason, and of course that obviously meant that I couldn't spend more than 180 days in India. Well, the luxury of spending 180 days out of India, running this new opportunity in international business,
Paints business.
I was able to do it only because of the